The syringe was 3 inches from Titan's vein when the vet saw something that made her drop it. Ethan Cole, a Navy SEAL who'd survived 2 combat deployments without flinching, was on his knees, sobbing into his dog's fur, begging God for 1 more minute. Titan, the most decorated military working dog in the unit, had wrapped his trembling paws around Ethan's shoulders and was crying, real tears rolling down his face, refusing to let go. Then the vet leaned closer. Her hands stopped. Her face changed. Something was terribly, impossibly wrong. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. If you believe loyalty can save a life, subscribe and stay until the very end. The phone rang at 5:47 in the morning, and Ethan Cole knew before he answered it that the world was about to break. He was already awake. He was always awake at this hour. 8 years as a Navy SEAL had destroyed his ability to sleep past 5, and the silence of civilian mornings still felt like a threat his body hadn't learned to trust. He sat on the edge of his bed in base housing, boots already laced, NWU Type 3 uniform pressed and squared, because discipline was the last thing holding him together. The caller ID read, Naval Veterinary Clinic, Norfolk. They never called unless it was the worst kind of news. Petty Officer Cole, this is Dr. Mercer. The voice was calm but careful. The voice of someone choosing every word because the wrong one would detonate. You need to come in, now. It's Titan. Ethan's chest locked. What happened? He collapsed overnight. His vitals dropped fast. We've stabilized him, but... She paused. That pause said everything. He's very weak, Ethan. You should be here. He didn't remember grabbing his keys. He didn't remember starting the truck or running 2 red lights on the base road. All he remembered was the sound of his own heartbeat hammering in his ears, and the single thought that looped through his skull like a distress signal. Hold on, buddy. Please, hold on. Titan wasn't just his canine partner. Titan was the reason Ethan Cole was still alive. 6 years old, German Shepherd, tan and black saddleback coat that turned gold in sunlight and dark as iron in shadow. Military working dog, 3 deployments, more confirmed explosive detections than any canine in the unit's history. Titan had found IEDs that would have killed entire platoons. He'd tracked hostiles through mountain passes in conditions that would break most animals. And 18 months ago, during an ambush that killed 2 members of their element, Titan had dragged Ethan 30 feet across open ground with shrapnel in his handler's leg and gunfire cutting the air above them. Ethan owed that dog everything, and now that dog was dying, and Ethan was driving 80 miles an hour through a military base at dawn because the thought of Titan leaving this world without him was more terrifying than anything he'd faced in combat. He burst through the clinic doors and saw them immediately. Davis and Ward, 2 SEALs from his unit, standing in the corridor. Their eyes were red. Davis had his arms crossed, jaw working like he was grinding his teeth to keep from falling apart. Ward leaned against the wall with his head down, unable to look up. They had both served with Titan. They had both been saved by him, and neither of them could speak. "How bad?" Ethan said. Davis swallowed hard. "Bad, brother. Real bad." Dr. Anna Mercer met him outside the exam room. She was in her 40s, tall, steady-handed, with the kind of face that had delivered hard truths so many times it had learned to do it without flinching. But today, her eyes were softer than Ethan had ever seen them, and that softness terrified him more than anything she could have said. "His organ functions dropped significantly overnight," she said. "We've given him oxygen support, medication, everything we have. His body isn't responding. You said he was improving yesterday. He was. But something changed. This wasn't a gradual decline, Ethan. It was sudden. almost as if his body was fighting something we can't identify. "So find it." "We're trying, but I have to be honest with you." She paused. "Command has authorized euthanasia. The paperwork came through an hour ago." The word hit Ethan like a round to the chest. Euthanasia. They were going to kill his dog. They were going to put a needle in Titan's vein and stop his heart, because a piece of paper said it was the merciful thing to do. "No," Ethan said. "Not yet." "Ethan, I said not yet. Let me see him." She opened the door. Titan lay on a padded table, wrapped in a gray blanket. His powerful body, the body that had cleared fences and taken down men twice his size, was trembling. His breathing came in shallow, ragged pulls that sounded like each one cost him something he couldn't afford. His coat, usually rich and gleaming, looked dull. His eyes, usually sharp enough to read a room in seconds, were clouded and heavy. But when he saw Ethan, something flickered inside them. Recognition. Love. The fierce, unbreakable thing that had connected them since the day a wild, untrusting 2-year-old dog had growled at a young seal, and the young seal had said, "I'll take him," and meant it with his whole life. Ethan dropped to his knees beside the table. His hands found Titan's face, cradling it the way he'd done 1,000 times. After missions, after nightmares, after the long nights when the only thing that kept him breathing was the sound of this dog breathing beside him. "Hey, boy," he whispered. "I'm here." Titan tried to lift his head. His muscles strained. His neck shook with the effort. He managed 1/2 inch before it fell back down. But his paw, his front right paw, slid across the table and pressed against Ethan's wrist. Holding on. Ethan felt every memory they'd ever made crash through him at once. The first week of training, when Titan refused every command, and Ethan sat beside his kennel every night, just talking, earning trust 1 inch at a time. The stormy night in week 3, when Titan finally rested his head on Ethan's knee, and the bond locked into place like a round chambering. The burning compound in Afghanistan, where Titan led their element through smoke so thick you couldn't see your own hand. Nose working, body tense, never hesitating, never doubting. The ambush that should have killed Ethan, the shrapnel, the blood, the weight of Titan's jaws on his vest, dragging him through dirt and gravel while bullets tore the ground apart around them. This dog had given him everything, and now Ethan knelt beside him, with nothing to give back except the warmth of his hands and words that felt too small for what they carried. "You saved my life," Ethan said, voice cracking. "More times than I deserve. You never quit, not once. You never left me." His breath hitched. "I'm not leaving you." Dr. Mercer entered quietly. Behind her, she carried a small metal tray. The sound of it, the soft clink of instruments, the careful placement of the syringe, filled the room with a weight that pressed down on everyone in it. Davis turned away. His shoulders shook once, hard, then he locked himself still. Ward pressed his fist against the wall and didn't move. "When you're ready," Dr. Mercer whispered. Ethan couldn't speak. He wrapped both arms around Titan and pulled him close, burying his face in the dog's fur. He smelled like antiseptic, and underneath it, like earth and rain and every mission they'd survived together. "You've done your duty," Ethan whispered into Titan's neck. "You were brave every single day. You were the best of us. If this is your time..." His voice shattered. He couldn't finish. He held on tighter, because letting go felt like dying. And then Titan moved. Not a twitch, not a reflex. The dog gathered whatever strength he had left, strength that shouldn't have existed in a body this broken, and lifted his trembling front paws. He wrapped them around Ethan's shoulders. He pressed his head into the curve of Ethan's neck, and he held on. Davis made a sound like he'd been punched in the stomach. Ward slid down the wall until he was sitting on the floor, hand over his mouth. Dr. Mercer lowered her head and closed her eyes. Titan was hugging him. Not leaning, not collapsing. Hugging, with deliberate, desperate, heartbreaking intention. His paws trembled against Ethan's back. His body shook with the effort. And then Ethan felt it. Something hot and wet sliding onto his sleeve. Tears. Titan was crying. Real tears, rolling from the dog's clouded eyes, soaking into the camouflage fabric of Ethan's uniform. Each one felt like a word the dog couldn't speak. Each one landed with the weight of a goodbye that neither of them was ready for. Ethan broke completely. The composure he'd built over 8 years of war, the steady voice, the locked jaw, the ability to watch terrible things happen and keep moving. All of it collapsed. He sobbed into Titan's fur with the raw, unguarded grief of a man who had finally found the one loss he couldn't survive. "I'm here," he choked. "I'm right here, buddy. I'm not going anywhere." Titan pressed closer, as if the hug wasn't enough, as if he was trying to climb inside Ethan's chest and stay there where nothing could reach him. Dr. Mercer stepped forward. Her hand was steady. Her eyes were not. She'd performed euthanasia dozens of times in her career. She'd held the hands of handlers who couldn't hold themselves, but she had never, not once, seen a dog wrap his arms around his person and cry. She lifted the syringe. Ethan closed his eyes. And then Dr. Mercer stopped. Not slowly, not hesitantly. She stopped the way a person stops when every alarm in their training fires at once. Sharp, sudden, total. "Wait," she said. Ethan opened his eyes. Dr. Mercer was staring at the monitor beside Titan's table. The numbers were jumping. Not the slow fade of a dying animal, but erratic, spiking, surging in patterns that didn't match anything she'd seen in organ failure. Titan's heart rate was climbing. His body was jerking. Not the weakness of a system shutting down, but the involuntary response of a body reacting to pain. Specific pain. Localized pain. The kind that comes from one place, not everywhere. "This isn't right," Dr. Mercer whispered. She set the syringe down. Her hands moved to Titan's ribcage, pressing gently along the left side. Titan yelped, a sharp, sudden cry that shot through the room like a gunshot. Ethan flinched. Davis spun around. Ward scrambled to his feet. "That's not organ failure," Dr. Mercer said, her voice changing, the sorrow draining out, replaced by something harder, sharper, clinical focus. "That's focal trauma. Something is inside him." "Inside him?" Ethan's blood went cold. "What do you mean, inside him?" Dr. Mercer looked up. Her face was white. "I mean, his organs aren't failing because they're diseased. They're failing because something is pressing on them. Something that shouldn't be there." She pulled her hands back from Titan's body and stared at Ethan with an expression that carried equal parts horror and desperate hope. "We need x-rays. Right now. Because if I'm right, we almost just killed a dog who isn't dying. He's injured, and he's been hiding it." Ethan looked down at Titan. The dog still had his paw on Ethan's wrist. His eyes were clouded, exhausted, glazed with pain. But behind all of it, burning so faint you could almost miss it, was something Ethan recognized. The same fire he'd seen the day they met. The same stubborn, furious, unbreakable will that had made a wild, scarred 2-year-old growl at a stranger and dare him to try. Titan wasn't saying goodbye. He was asking for help. And Ethan Cole, who would never once fail to answer when his partner needed him in combat, was not about to fail him now. They moved fast. Dr. Mercer called for the portable X-ray unit, while Ethan steadied Titan on the table. The dog was trembling harder now, each breath costing him something visible. A small shudder, a tightening of his jaw, a flicker behind his clouded eyes that Ethan recognized as the same expression Titan wore when he detected a threat and was deciding whether to engage or hold. He was holding. He'd been holding for God knows how long. "I need him on his left side," Dr. Mercer said, positioning the machine. "Gently. If there's something lodged in there, we can't risk shifting it." Ethan placed his hands under Titan's body and rolled him with the care of a man handling something more precious than his own life. Titan whimpered, a sound that cut through Ethan's chest like a blade. But he didn't fight. His eyes found Ethan's face and stayed locked there. Trusting. Completely, absolutely trusting. "Hold him steady." "I've got him." The first X-ray fired. A sharp flash. Titan flinched, not from the light, but from the pressure of being repositioned. His paw scraped the table. "Lower angle," Dr. Mercer said. "Focus on the rib cage, left side, between the 6th and 8th rib." Second flash. Ethan's hands didn't leave Titan's fur. Davis stepped closer, his jaw clenched so tight the muscles in his neck stood out like cables. Ward hadn't moved from the wall, but his eyes were wide open now, watching everything. The technician loaded the scans onto the monitor. Her fingers moved fast. The screen blinked on. Everyone leaned in, and the room went dead silent. There, between the pale outlines of ribs and organs, glowing against the gray like a splinter of lightning frozen in bone, was something dark. Something metallic. Something jagged and angular and completely, unmistakably wrong. "What the hell is that?" Davis breathed. Dr. Mercer zoomed in. Her face tightened. The clinical composure she'd rebuilt after stopping the euthanasia cracked again. Not with sorrow this time, but with something closer to fury. "That is a foreign object," she said. "Metallic, sharp, lodged deep between the ribs, approximately 4 millimeters from the left pulmonary artery." Ethan felt the ground shift beneath him. "A fragment? Like shrapnel?" "Like a bullet," said a voice from the doorway. Everyone turned. Dr. Victor Kahn stood at the entrance, tall, gray-templed, wearing surgical scrubs, and the unreadable expression of a man who'd spent 30 years cutting things out of people and animals that shouldn't have been inside them. He was a visiting military surgical specialist, on base for a training rotation. He'd heard the commotion and come to investigate. He crossed the room in 4 steps, leaned into the monitor, and studied the image with an intensity that made the air feel thinner. "That's not debris," Kahn said quietly. "That's a projectile fragment. Approximately 7.62 millimeter caliber. It entered between the ribs with enough velocity to penetrate deep tissue, but not enough to exit. It's been sitting there, shifting with every breath, every movement, every heartbeat." He turned to Ethan. "How long has this dog been symptomatic?" "His vitals started dropping 2 days ago," Dr. Mercer answered. "But the collapse was sudden, overnight." "Because the fragment migrated," Kahn said. "It's been pressing against the artery wall. Every movement pushes it closer. His organs aren't failing from disease. They're failing because this thing is slowly killing him from the inside, and his body has been compensating until it couldn't anymore." Ethan stared at the X-ray. The image burned into his brain. That small, jagged piece of metal, sitting inside the dog who had saved his life more times than he could count, hidden behind ribs that never stopped working, beneath fur that never stopped pressing against Ethan's hand at night. "How long?" Ethan asked. His voice was barely a whisper. "How long has he been carrying it?" Khan looked at Dr. Mercer. "Pull up the tissue analysis." She did. Khan studied it, then turned to Ethan with an expression that wasn't clinical anymore. It was something heavier, something that looked like grief wearing a doctor's face. "There's scar tissue around the wound channel. Layered. That means healing has occurred over time, not hours or days." He paused. "This fragment has been inside him for at least 2 weeks, possibly longer." The room contracted around Ethan like a fist closing. 2 weeks. 14 days. Titan had been carrying a piece of metal inside his body for 2 weeks. Training, deploying, working, sleeping beside Ethan's bed, nudging his hand after nightmares, running drills, clearing buildings. All of it with a bullet fragment shifting between his ribs with every single breath. And he never once showed pain. Not a whimper, not a limp, not a single moment of hesitation that Ethan could point to and say, "That's when I should have known." "He hit it," Ethan said. "He's a military working dog," Dr. Mercer said softly. "They protect until their bodies physically can't. He probably felt the pain every day and overrode it because the mission, and you, mattered more." Ethan pressed his hand against the table to keep himself upright. Something was building inside his chest. Not just grief, not just anger, but a kind of reckoning. The slow, sickening realization that the dog he thought was invincible had been quietly dying beside him, and he'd missed it. "Where did this happen?" Khan asked. "What was the last combat exposure?" The memory hit Ethan so hard he had to close his eyes. 2 weeks ago. A classified night operation. Extraction of a captured intelligence asset from a compound in a hostile zone. Their SEAL element had been inserted by helicopter under cover of darkness. Titan was running point, nose working, clearing corridors, doing what he did better than any living thing Ethan had ever known. They reached the asset, secured him, began extraction. And then the compound lit up. Gunfire from at least 3 positions, muzzle flashes in the darkness, rounds tearing through concrete and plaster, ricocheting off metal, filling the air with the sound of things trying to kill you. Ethan returned fire, while Davis and Ward moved the asset toward the extraction point. Titan stayed at Ethan's side, not behind him, beside him, body low, ears flat, doing the only thing that dog had ever known how to do, putting himself between his handler and the thing trying to destroy him. In the chaos, Ethan heard it, a sharp, metallic crack, different from the gunfire, closer, like a round hitting something dense. Titan stumbled. Just a half step, a fraction of a second. Then he shook it off and kept moving. Ethan checked him afterward. No blood, no visible wound, no change in behavior. Titan wagged his tail when Ethan ran his hands over him and licked Ethan's face, and acted exactly the way a dog acts when the danger is over and his person is still breathing. Ethan hadn't thought about it since. Not once. Because Titan was Titan. The dog who always shook it off. The dog who always kept going. The dog who never let pain win. Until now. "He was hit during an extraction," Ethan said, his voice raw. 2 weeks ago. There was an ambush. I heard a ricochet. He stumbled for half a second and then kept working. I checked him. There was nothing. No wound. No blood. A high-velocity fragment can penetrate between the ribs without leaving an obvious entry mark, Khan said, especially through thick fur and dense muscle. It would have felt like a hard impact, painful, but not immediately debilitating. He would have pushed through it on adrenaline and training. He tracked the asset to extraction after that, Ethan said. He cleared 2 more corridors. He was perfect. He was wounded and working through it, Khan said, because that's what he was trained to do, and that's what he chose to do, for you. Ward spoke for the first time. His voice was hoarse, barely above a whisper. You said the fragment is 7.62. That's the same caliber the hostiles were using. Correct, Khan said. So he took a round during the ambush. A fragment of one, yes. Davis stepped forward. His face had changed. The grief was still there, but something else was rising underneath it, something sharper. What angle did it enter? Khan looked at him, then back at the X-ray. He studied the trajectory for a long moment. The angle of penetration, the path through tissue, the position of the fragment relative to the entry point. When he looked up, his expression had gone very still. The trajectory is consistent with a round traveling from approximately 45 degrees forward left of the dog's position. He paused. Based on his anatomical position, low, moving forward, the most likely scenario is that the dog was between the shooter and a target behind him. The words hung in the air. Ethan felt them land one at a time, each one heavier than the last. He was between the shooter and someone behind him, Ethan repeated. Yes. I was behind him. Khan didn't answer. He didn't need to. The bullet was meant for me, Ethan said, and the words came out flat and dead. The way words come out when the truth they carry is so heavy the voice can't hold it up anymore. Titan intercepted it. He put himself in front of me and took a bullet that was aimed at my chest. And then he kept working for 2 more weeks with it inside him, because stopping would have meant I was unprotected. Nobody spoke. Davis pressed both hands against his face. Ward sat down on the floor slowly, deliberately, like a man whose legs had just stopped working. Dr. Mercer turned away and pressed a hand over her mouth. Ethan looked down at Titan. The dog was watching him, still watching, still holding on, still there. His paw had found Ethan's wrist again, pressing against it with whatever strength he had left. And in his clouded, pain-filled eyes, there was nothing but the same thing there had always been. Love. Fierce, unconditional, all-consuming love. The kind that doesn't calculate cost. The kind that looks at a bullet and decides, without hesitation, without regret, that the person behind you is worth more than the body you're standing in. Can you save him? Ethan asked Khan. His voice broke on the word save, and he didn't care. Khan met his eyes. The fragment is lodged near a major artery. Extracting it is possible, but extremely dangerous. If it shifts during surgery, even 1 millimeter, he bleeds out on the table. But it's possible. It's possible. Not certain. Not safe. But possible. Ethan looked at Titan. The dog blinked slowly. His tail moved, barely, just a fraction of an inch, but it moved. One thump. The faintest pulse of life in a body that was running out of time. One thump was enough. It had always been enough. Do it, Ethan said. Whatever it takes, whatever the risk, you save him. Khan nodded once. Then we move. Now. Every hour that fragment stays inside him increases the chance of a fatal rupture. He turned and called for the surgical team. Voices rose. Equipment moved. The clinic shifted from silence to urgency in the space of a heartbeat. Ethan stayed beside Titan. He leaned down until his forehead pressed against the dog's. He could feel Titan's breath, shallow, strained, warm against his skin. You carried it for me, Ethan whispered. You took a bullet and you didn't make a sound. You protected me every single day with a piece of metal cutting you apart inside. his voice shattered. "I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry I didn't know." Titan's paw tightened on Ethan's wrist. Not much. Just enough. The grip of a dog who had spent 6 years saying the only thing he'd ever needed to say. "I'm here. I'm yours. Whatever comes, I'm not letting go." And Ethan Cole made a promise to that grip. A promise he would keep if it cost him everything he had left. He was going to fight for the one who had never stopped fighting for him. They wheeled Titan toward the operating room, and Ethan walked beside the stretcher with his hand on the dog's head, fingers buried in the tan and black fur that had been the first thing he touched every morning and the last thing he touched every night for 6 years. Titan's breathing had gotten worse. Each inhale rattled. Each exhale came with a tremor that ran through his entire body and into Ethan's palm. The dog's eyes were half open, clouded, fighting to stay conscious with a stubbornness that would have been inspiring if it wasn't so terrifying. "You're going to make it," Ethan whispered, leaning close to Titan's ear. "You hear me? You don't quit. That's our rule. You don't quit, and I don't quit." Titan's tail moved, one thump against the stretcher pad. Weak. Certain. They reached the surgical doors. Dr. Khan stopped and turned to Ethan. His face carried the controlled intensity of a man about to do something that could go either way, and knew it. "I need to be straight with you," Khan said. "The fragment is 4 millimeters from his left pulmonary artery. If it shifts during extraction, even a fraction, he bleeds out in under 90 seconds. His body is already compromised. His vitals are unstable. This surgery has maybe a 60% chance of success under ideal conditions, and these are not ideal conditions." "What's the alternative?" Ethan asked. "There isn't one. If we don't operate, the fragment continues to migrate and he dies within hours. If we do operate, he might die on the table." Khan paused. "But he has a chance. That's more than he had 20 minutes ago when that syringe was about to go into his vein." Ethan looked down at Titan. The dog's paw was still pressed against his wrist, still holding on, still saying the only thing he'd ever needed to say. "Give him the chance," Ethan said. Khan nodded. "We go now." A nurse touched Ethan's arm. "We need to take him in." Ethan didn't move. His fingers stayed locked in Titan's fur. Letting go felt like stepping off a cliff with no guarantee of ground below. He leaned down one last time, pressing his forehead against Titan's. "Fight, buddy," he whispered. "You fight like hell. I'll be right here when you wake up. I promise." Titan's nose pressed against Ethan's cheek, warm, dry, the faintest trace of breath against his skin. Then the stretcher moved forward. The surgical doors swung open. Titan disappeared behind them, and Ethan Cole stood in that corridor and felt every piece of himself go through those doors with a dog who couldn't hear him anymore. Davis caught his arm. "Come on, brother. Come sit down." "I can't sit down." "Then stand. But don't stand here staring at that door alone." Ethan let Davis guide him to the waiting area. Ward was already there, sitting with his elbows on his knees and his head down, hands clasped so tight his knuckles were white. The three of them occupied the space the way SEALs occupy any room. Alert, restless, trained for action, but forced into the one posture they were worst at: waiting. Minutes passed like they were being dragged through concrete. Ethan paced, 5 steps forward, 5 steps back. His boots hit the floor with a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. Too fast, too hard, too loud for a room this quiet. He replayed the ambush in his head. The muzzle flashes, the ricochets, the half-second stumble he'd dismissed because Titan shook it off the way Titan always shook everything off. He should have known. He should have checked harder, looked closer. refused to accept that a dog who'd just been in a firefight was perfectly fine just because the dog acted perfectly fine. But that was Titan's curse and his gift. He was so good at protecting others that he made it look effortless, even when it was killing him. "Stop," Davis said quietly. Ethan looked at him. "Whatever you're blaming yourself for, stop. You checked him. You ran your hands over every inch of him. There was no wound, no blood, no change. You did what any handler would do. Any handler would have caught it. No handler on earth would have caught it," Davis said. Khan said it himself. The entry point was invisible under his fur. The dog didn't limp, didn't whine, didn't give you a single sign. He chose to hide it. Because that's who he is. "That's the problem," Ethan said, and his voice broke on the last word. "He loves me more than he loves himself. He always has. And I just kept sending him to work while he was bleeding inside." Ward lifted his head. His eyes were raw. "You remember Kandahar?" he said. "The building collapse?" Ethan nodded. Titan dug through rubble for 9 hours to find that interpreter's kid. 9 hours. His paws were shredded. He was dehydrated. He wouldn't stop. I tried to pull him back, and he growled at me. The only time that dog ever growled at a friendly. You know why? Ethan didn't answer. Because the kid was still under there, and Titan knew it, and nothing in this world was going to make him stop until that child was breathing in open air. That's not training, Ethan. That's who he is. A bullet inside his ribs wasn't going to change that. Nothing changes that. A sound erupted from behind the surgical doors. An alarm, sharp, shrill, the kind that cuts through every other sound in a building and replaces it with dread. Ethan spun toward the doors. Another alarm joined the first. Then a voice, muffled, urgent, commanding. Then the rapid slap of shoes on tile. Davis was on his feet. "What's happening?" The surgical door burst open. "Doctor." Mercer came through, mask pulled below her chin, eyes wide with the controlled panic of a professional who was losing a fight and knew the next 30 seconds would decide everything. "His heart stopped," she said. "We're working on him." Ethan's legs went. Not partially, completely. 1 second he was standing, the next his knees hit the floor like someone had cut the cables holding him up. Davis grabbed him under the arm. "Stopped?" Ethan choked. "What do you mean, stopped?" "He flatlined during extraction. Dr. Khan is performing manual cardiac stimulation. He's dead? Is he dead?" "He's not dead. His heart arrested. There's a difference. We're trying to bring him back." "Let me in there." "Ethan, you can't. That's my dog. That's my partner. He's dying in there and he's alone. Let me in." "If you go in there, you become a variable we can't control, and he needs every advantage right now." Dr. Mercer grabbed his shoulders. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Listen to me. Dr. Khan is the best surgeon I've ever worked with. If anyone can bring Titan back, it's him. But I need you to let him work. Can you do that?" Ethan couldn't breathe. His chest was collapsing inward. Every combat scenario he'd survived. Firefights, explosions, the ambush that nearly killed him. None of them felt like this. None of them carried this specific breed of helplessness. The kind that comes from knowing the person you love most is behind a wall you can't breach, fighting a battle you can't join. "Please," Ethan whispered. It wasn't aimed at Dr. Mercer. It wasn't aimed at anyone in the room. It was aimed straight up, at whatever was above this ceiling, above this building, above the fear and the machines and the sound of alarms that were still screaming behind those doors. "Please don't take him. Not like this. Not after everything he gave." Davis held him up. Ward stood behind them, silent, tears running freely down a face that had never shown fear in combat. Seconds passed. Each one felt like a door closing. Then the alarms changed. Not silence. Rhythm. The frantic clashing shrieks dissolved into something steadier. A pulse. A pattern. A heartbeat finding its way back from the place where heartbeats go when the body decides to let go. The surgical door opened. Khan stepped through. His scrubs were damp with sweat, his surgical gown stained, his face carrying the exhaustion of a man who just fought something with his bare hands and won by the thinnest margin God allows. "We got him back," Khan said. Ethan made a sound that wasn't a word. It came from somewhere stronger than he had any right to respond, given his condition. He shook his head slowly. "I've operated on men and animals for 30 years. I have never seen anything fight the way that dog fought on that table." His body quit. His heart did not. "The fragment?" Ethan managed. "Removed. Intact. It was embedded deeper than the imaging showed, wrapped in scar tissue, pressing against the arterial wall. Another 12 hours and it would have ruptured." Khan held up a small sealed container. Inside it, a jagged piece of metal the size of a fingernail caught the light. Dark, angular, stained with the evidence of everything it had done to a dog who never complained. This is what he was carrying. For 2 weeks. Through training. Through missions. Through every moment he spent beside you. Ethan stared at the fragment. Such a small thing. Small enough to miss on a field check. Small enough to hide behind thick fur and dense muscle. Small enough to carry in silence. And big enough to kill the most loyal soul he'd ever known. "He's not out of danger," Khan said. "The next 24 hours are critical. His body has been through massive trauma. The fragment damage, the organ stress, cardiac arrest, and now major surgery. He's sedated and on full life support." He paused. "But he's alive, Ethan. And I don't think he plans to stop being alive anytime soon." "Can I see him?" Khan nodded. "He won't be conscious, but he'll know you're there. Dogs like Titan always know." Ethan followed Khan down the corridor to recovery. His legs felt like they belonged to someone else. Davis walked behind him. Ward brought up the rear. None of them spoke. Some moments are too heavy for words, and too sacred to fill with noise. Titan lay on a padded recovery mat, bandaged heavily along his left side, connected to IVs and monitors and an oxygen line that fogged gently with each shallow breath. His tan and black coat was dulled by surgical prep solution. His body was still. His chest rose and fell in a rhythm that the machines were helping maintain. But he was breathing. He was there. He was alive. Ethan lowered himself to the floor beside the mat. He took Titan's paw in his hand, gently, carefully, the way you hold something that almost shattered, and somehow didn't. "I'm here," he whispered. "I told you I wasn't going anywhere." Titan didn't wake, but his paw twitched, faintly, instinctively, curling toward Ethan's fingers. The unconscious reflex of a dog whose body might be shut down, but whose heart still recognized the one voice it was wired to find. Davis and Ward stood in the doorway. Davis wiped his face with both hands. Ward leaned against the frame, eyes closed, breathing hard through his nose. "Stay as long as you need," Dr. Mercer said from behind them. Her voice had changed. The clinical edge was gone, replaced by something raw and human and unguarded. "I'll make sure no one disturbs you." Ethan nodded without looking up. His hand stayed wrapped around Titan's paw. The monitor beeped. The oxygen hissed. The night pressed in around them. And there, on the floor of a military veterinary clinic, a Navy SEAL who had never prayed in combat dropped his head and prayed for a dog. Not for missions, not for medals, not for anything the Navy had ever taught him to value. For the heartbeat under his hand. For the paw that still reached for him even in unconsciousness. For the 6 years of silent, ferocious, impossible love that had kept him alive and was now asking, for the first and only time, to be kept alive in return. Somewhere near dawn, Ethan's eyes closed. His head rested against the edge of Titan's mat. His hand never let go of the paw. And in the stillness between one breath and the next, man and dog held on to each other the way they always had. Stubbornly, fiercely, and with the quiet certainty that letting go was never something either of them learned how to do. The first light hit the recovery room just after 6. Ethan stirred awake with his neck locked at an angle that would punish him for hours, and his hand still wrapped around Titan's paw. He hadn't moved all night. His body had shut down where it sat, but his fingers had stayed locked, as if some part of him that didn't need sleep understood that letting go wasn't an option. He blinked, looked at Titan. The dog was still, bandaged, breathing. Breathing. That single word carried more weight than any mission briefing Ethan had ever received. He watched Titan's chest rise and fall, shallow, fragile, but rhythmic, steady. Each breath a quiet act of defiance from a body that had every reason to stop, and refused. A nurse entered to check the IV lines. She paused when she saw Ethan on the floor, uniform wrinkled, eyes bloodshot, hand still holding the paw of a sedated German shepherd. "You should eat something," she said softly. "I'm fine. You've been here 14 hours. "I know." She adjusted the fluid drip and checked the monitor. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "His numbers improved overnight. Heart rate stabilized. Oxygen saturation is up 3%. She looked at Ethan. "Whatever you're doing, keep doing it." Ethan pressed his thumb against the pad of Titan's paw. "I'm not doing anything. He's doing it." An hour passed, then 2. Ethan talked to Titan the way he'd always talked to him. Low, steady, the constant murmur of a handler who'd learned early that his voice was the anchor his dog navigated by. He talked about the first week of training, about the night Titan finally rested his head on his knee, about the time Titan stole a sandwich off Davis's plate during a briefing, and nobody said a word because watching a 70-pound German shepherd eat a turkey sub with absolute dignity was the funniest thing any of them had seen in months. He talked because silence felt like giving up, and neither of them had ever been good at that. Then Titan's ear twitched. Ethan froze. His hand tightened around the paw. He stared at the ear, the right one, the one that always moved first, the one that tracked sounds the way radar tracks aircraft, and watched it flicker again. A small, deliberate movement, not a reflex, a response. "Titan," Ethan whispered. "Hey, buddy, I'm right here." The other ear moved. Then the paw in Ethan's hand shifted. Not a twitch this time, but a press. Deliberate, conscious. Titan was squeezing back. "That's it," Ethan said, and his voice cracked like a dam giving way. "That's it, boy. Come on. Come back to me." Titan's eyes opened. Not all at once. First, a sliver, a thin crescent of brown catching the overhead light. Then wider, hazy, unfocused, searching through the fog of sedation and pain and surgery for the one thing that mattered. His gaze drifted, lost focus, found the ceiling, lost it again, then found Ethan's face, and stopped. Recognition hit like a flare in darkness. Titan's pupils dilated. His nostrils flared. His tail moved under the blanket. The faintest wag, barely visible, but carrying more meaning than 1,000 words. A raspy whine escaped his throat, half cry, half greeting. The sound of a dog who'd gone somewhere very far away and fought his way back to the only place he'd ever wanted to be. Ethan cupped Titan's face in both hands. Tears ran down his cheeks, and he made no effort to stop them. "You made it," he whispered. "You hear me? You made it. I'm here. I never left." Titan's tongue scraped weakly against Ethan's wrist. Once. The smallest gesture. The biggest statement a dog could make. "I know. I know you never left." Dr. Mercer appeared in the doorway. She took one look at Titan's open eyes and pressed her hand to her chest. "Oh," she said, and her professional composure dissolved into something purely human. "Oh, he's awake." She moved to the monitors, checking numbers, adjusting settings, her hands steady even as her eyes glistened. "Heart rate strong, oxygen improving, neural responses active." She looked at Ethan with something like wonder. He's not just surviving, he's recovering. After cardiac arrest, major surgery, and 2 weeks of internal damage, he's actually recovering. "That's Titan," Ethan said. "He doesn't know how to quit." Dr. Khan arrived within the hour. He examined Titan thoroughly, testing responses, checking the surgical site, monitoring organ function. When he finished, he stood and looked at Ethan with the expression of a man who had seen enough medicine to know that science doesn't explain everything. "His body is healing faster than any projection I would have made," Khan said. "The organ damage is reversing. The surgical site is clean. His pain responses are appropriate and controlled." He paused. "I don't have a clinical explanation for why a dog in his condition is recovering at this rate. I have a personal one, but you'd have to buy me a drink before I share it." Ethan almost smiled. Almost. Khan's expression shifted then, the warmth fading into something more serious. He glanced at the door, then back at Ethan. "There's something else we need to discuss. I sent the fragment to the base forensics lab this morning." Ethan's spine straightened. "And?" "The analysis confirmed what I suspected. It's a 7.62 by 39 millimeter fragment, consistent with ammunition used by hostile forces in the region where your extraction took place." Khan reached into his jacket and pulled out a sealed evidence folder. "But the ballistics don't match any weapon recovered from the compound." Ethan stared at him. "What does that mean?" "It means the round that hit Titan didn't come from the enemy positions your team engaged. The trajectory, the angle, the fragmentation pattern, they're consistent with a shot fired from behind your element, not in front of it." The room contracted. Ethan felt the air leave his lungs like he'd been hit in the chest. "Behind us," he repeated. The fragment entered Titan's left side, at an angle that indicates the shooter was positioned approximately 20 to 30 meters behind and to the left of the dog's direction of travel. Khan set the folder down. "During your extraction, who was behind your element?" Ethan's mind raced. He replayed the mission, every position, every movement, every face. The main element was Ethan, Davis, and Ward moving the asset. Titan was running point. Behind them, providing rear cover, was the support team. 2 members positioned to cover the extraction route. One of them was Lieutenant Greg Haynes. "Haynes was on rear security," Ethan said slowly. "Left flank. Left flank. 20 to 30 meters behind your position." Ethan felt something cold crawl up his spine and settle at the base of his skull. You're saying the shot came from our own line? Khan held his gaze. I'm saying the physics of this fragment don't support a hostile origin. The angle is wrong. The distance is wrong. And the fact that no matching weapon was recovered from the compound means either the hostiles had a shooter in a position your team didn't identify, or the shot came from somewhere your team wasn't looking. Because we don't look behind us, Ethan said quietly. We trust the people behind us. Khan said nothing. He didn't need to. Ethan looked at Titan. The dog was watching him with half-open eyes, ears tilted forward, paw still resting against Ethan's wrist. Even sedated, even broken, even held together by stitches and IVs and the sheer refusal to die, Titan was reading him. Sensing the shift, feeling the change in Ethan's heartbeat through the place where their skin touched. I need to make a call, Ethan said. He stepped into the corridor and pulled out his phone. His hands were steady. His mind was clear. The grief and fear of the last 24 hours had compressed into something harder, something with edges. The same focused intensity he felt before every breach, every insertion, every moment where hesitation meant failure. He called Commander Stone. Stone answered on the first ring. He was career Navy, 30 years, multiple commands, a voice like gravel, and a bullshit detector that had never failed. He'd served with Ethan's father, and he'd watched Ethan grow from a raw recruit into one of the best operators in the unit. He didn't waste words. Cole, how's the dog? Alive, recovering. They pulled a bullet fragment out of his ribs. Silence. Then, explain. Ethan explained. The fragment, the trajectory, the angle, the ballistics that didn't match any hostile weapon. The position of Lieutenant Greg Haynes on the left rear flank during extraction. Stone listened without interrupting. When Ethan finished, the silence on the other end lasted 4 full seconds, an eternity from a man who made decisions the way other people breathed. You're telling me one of ours may have fired on your canine during a live extraction? I'm telling you the forensics don't support a hostile origin, and Haynes was in the only position consistent with the trajectory. That's an accusation that ends careers, Cole, including yours if you're wrong. I'm not wrong, sir. My dog carried that fragment for 2 weeks. He almost died on an operating table this morning because of it. His heart stopped. They had to bring him back. Ethan's voice hardened. Someone fired a round that was meant for me, and Titan intercepted it. I want to know who, and I want to know why. Stone exhaled slowly. I'll contact NCIS within the hour. They'll want the forensic report, the surgical records, and a full debrief from you and your team. He paused. Cole, if this goes where you think it goes, it gets ugly. Fast. It's already ugly, sir. My dog took a bullet from someone he was supposed to trust. It doesn't get uglier than that. Stone was quiet for a moment. Your father would have said the same thing, almost the same words. He cleared his throat. I'll make the call. Stay with your dog. NCIS will come to you. They came within 3 hours. 2 agents, methodical, thorough, the kind of people who built cases the way architects built bridges, one precisely placed piece at a time. Ethan walked them through everything. The mission timeline, the ambush, the positions, Titan's stumble, the fragment, the trajectory analysis. Davis corroborated every detail. Then he added something Ethan hadn't heard before. During extraction, Haynes dropped behind the main element farther than protocol allowed, Davis said. I noticed it because his covering fire was delayed, about a 2-second gap where our rear was exposed. At the time, I assumed he'd stumbled or hit an obstruction. I logged it in my after-action notes, but didn't flag it. Ward confirmed something else. Haynes's weapon discharge report listed 14 rounds fired during the engagement, but his magazine count post-mission showed 16 rounds expended, 2 rounds unaccounted for. The NCIS agents exchanged a look, the kind of look that said a case was building faster than expected. Within 24 hours, Haynes was brought in for questioning. His story held for 40 minutes. Then it didn't. Communications records, recovered by NCIS Digital Forensics, showed encrypted contact between Haynes and a known intelligence broker 3 days before the extraction mission. The broker had ties to the same hostile network they'd been targeting. Haynes had provided the extraction route, the timing, and the team composition. The ambush wasn't random. It was purchased. And when the hostile fire didn't kill Ethan, because Titan was running point, because Titan positioned himself exactly where he always positioned himself, between his handler and the thing trying to destroy him, Haynes had taken the shot himself. He'd fired from the left rear flank during the chaos of the ambush, counting on the noise and confusion to mask it. The round hit Titan instead of Ethan because a 70-pound German Shepherd had shifted his body 2 inches to the left at the exact moment the trigger was pulled. 2 inches, the distance between Ethan's life and Ethan's death, measured in the instinct of a dog who loved his handler more than his own survival. Haynes broke during the second interrogation, not with drama, with the quiet collapse of a man whose debts had outgrown his conscience and whose greed had outgrown his honor. He'd sold the route for $60,000. He'd taken the shot because the broker demanded proof of completion. He'd almost killed the best operator in the unit. Instead, he'd put a bullet in the most loyal dog who ever lived and walked away like nothing happened. Ethan sat in the recovery room when Nora, the NCIS lead agent, delivered the confirmation. He listened with his hand on Titan's head, fingers moving slowly through the fur between the dog's ears. Titan was awake now, head resting on his front paws, eyes tracking Ethan's face with quiet attention. Haynes has been formally arrested, Nora said. Charges include espionage, conspiracy, attempted murder, and destruction of military assets. Titan's classification as a military working dog makes the shooting a federal offense. He's not an asset, Ethan said. He's my partner. Nora nodded. The broker network is being dismantled. 3 additional arrests are pending. The extracted asset has confirmed that the ambush specifically targeted your element. Ethan looked down at Titan. The dog blinked up at him, slow, trusting, steady. His tail moved once, one thump against the recovery mat. He knew, Ethan said softly. He didn't know who or why, but he knew something was wrong. He always positioned himself on my left side. Always. Even when protocol said he should be running point ahead of me, he'd drift left. I used to correct him. His voice tightened. He wasn't drifting. He was shielding. Nora watched him for a moment. Then she said something that wasn't in any report and wouldn't appear in any file. In 15 years of investigations, I've seen loyalty tested in every way imaginable. I've never seen anything like what that dog did. He took a bullet from a man your team trusted, hid the wound so you wouldn't pull him from duty, and continued protecting you every single day while it was killing him. She paused. There are people in this world who wouldn't do a fraction of that for someone they love. Ethan pressed his forehead to Titan's. The dog's breath was warm against his face. His heartbeat was steady under Ethan's palm. Strong now. Steady now. The heartbeat of an animal that had died on an operating table and come back because something inside him was more powerful than the thing trying to stop it. I know, buddy, Ethan whispered. I know what you did. Titan's tail thumped once more. His paw found Ethan's wrist and pressed against it. The same grip, the same hold, the same silent, unbreakable statement he'd been making since the day a young seal looked at a wild, scarred dog and said, "I'll take him." And somewhere in a holding cell on the other side of the base, the man who'd tried to destroy that bond sat alone with the knowledge that he'd failed. Not because of tactics or technology or the intervention of any human being, but because a dog loved his handler enough to catch a bullet with his own body and carry it in silence until the silence almost killed him. And still, somehow, love won. 3 days after surgery, the clinic doors opened and Ethan Cole walked out into the afternoon air with Titan beside him. Not carried, not on a stretcher, not wheeled out in a crate with tubes and monitors and the mechanical hum of machines keeping him alive. Walking, on his own 4 paws. Slowly, carefully, leaning into Ethan's leg when his balance shifted, pausing every few steps to gather himself, bandages still wrapped tight around his left side beneath the tan and black coat that caught the winter sun and turned it gold. Every step was deliberate. Every step cost him something. And every step was a declaration from a dog who had flatlined on an operating table, carried a bullet for 2 weeks, and decided, with whatever force lived inside him that was bigger than biology, that he was not finished yet. Ethan kept his hand on Titan's back, not guiding, steadying. The way you walk beside someone who's earned the right to move at their own pace. They made it through the clinic lobby, through the front entrance, into the parking lot. And that's when Ethan saw them. SEALs. Dozens of them, lining both sides of the walkway in their NWUs, forest green and brown digital camouflage, boots squared, shoulders back, faces locked in the kind of rigid composure that military men use when they're trying very hard not to cry. Davis stood at the front, Ward beside him. Behind them, operators from every team in the unit, men who had served with Titan, been protected by Titan, watched Titan clear buildings and find explosives and drag their brother out of a firefight with nothing but his jaws and his refusal to let go. Nobody spoke. Then Davis started clapping. One pair of hands, slow, steady. The deliberate rhythm of an applause that carries weight. Ward joined. Then the man behind him. Then the next. Then the next. The sound built like a wave. Not the roar of a stadium, but the low, fierce, controlled thunder of warriors honoring one of their own. Some whistled. Some pressed their lips together so tight their jaws shook. A Master Chief in the back row wiped his eyes with his sleeve and didn't care who saw it. Titan stopped. His ears lifted, both of them, even the one that didn't hear so well anymore, and rotated toward the sound. His tail began to wag. Not the weak, fractional movement of the recovery room. A real wag, steady and sure, carrying the unmistakable joy of a dog who recognized his people and was glad to be standing among them. Ethan knelt beside him. His throat was so tight he could barely breathe. "Look at that," he whispered, running his hand along Titan's jaw. "They came for you. Every one of them." Titan turned his head and licked Ethan's face. Once. Firm. The kind of lick that said everything language couldn't touch. Commander Stone stood at the end of the walkway. He was in full dress uniform, something Ethan had never seen him wear outside of ceremony. His face was stone, but his eyes were not. He stepped forward and crouched in front of Titan. The dog regarded him with calm, steady attention, the same way he regarded every authority figure, with respect, but without submission. Stone reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. He opened it, held it where Ethan could see, and read aloud in a voice that didn't waver because 30 years of command had taught him how to keep it level even when everything behind it was breaking. By order of Naval Special Warfare Command, Military Working Dog Titan, Handler Petty Officer Ethan Cole, is hereby awarded the Navy and Marine Corps Commendation for meritorious service in combat operations, specifically for sustaining a ballistic wound while shielding his handler from hostile fire, continuing to perform mission-critical duties despite severe internal injury, and demonstrating extraordinary loyalty and courage beyond the expectations of training or duty. Stone lowered the paper. He looked at Titan, then at Ethan. "I've signed commendations for men who did less than this dog," Stone said quietly. "He earned this 10 times over." Ethan took the document. His hands were shaking, not from fear, from the weight of holding something that meant Titan's sacrifice would exist in the official record, in black ink on Navy letterhead, for as long as records were kept. "Thank you, sir." Stone nodded. Then he did something Ethan had never seen him do in 15 years of service. He reached down and placed his hand on Titan's head, gently, almost reverently, and said, "Good boy." Titan's tail thumped once against the pavement. The Master Chief in the back row stopped trying to hide his tears. They drove home with the windows cracked. The air was cold but clean, carrying the smell of salt from the coast and the promise of a day that held nothing dangerous. Titan lay on the back seat, head resting on Ethan's folded jacket. Every few minutes, Ethan glanced in the rearview mirror, not checking traffic, checking Titan, making sure the chest was still rising, the eyes were still open, the dog was still there. Each time, Titan blinked back at him, calm, trusting, present. When they pulled into the driveway, Titan hesitated at the front door. He stood on the threshold, nose working, body still, as if he needed to verify that this place, this home, this life, was real and was his, and was safe. Ethan crouched beside him. "This is your home," he said softly. "It always has been. It always will be." Titan stepped inside. He moved through each room slowly, sniffing familiar corners. The kitchen floor, where he'd stolen more food than Ethan would ever admit. The hallway, where his leash hung on the same hook it had hung on for 6 years. The spot near the living room couch, where the carpet was permanently flattened in the exact shape of a German shepherd who believed that particular square of floor belonged to him and no one else. He circled once, twice. Then he lay down in his spot with a sigh so deep and so long it seemed to carry every ounce of pain and fear and fight from the last 3 days out of his body and into the ground beneath him. Ethan sat beside him. He stroked Titan's fur in long, slow motions, the way he'd done 1,000 times before, after missions, after nightmares, after the nights when the world was too loud and the only thing that made it bearable was the warmth of this dog against his side. "You know what Khan told me?" Ethan said. Titan's ear tilted toward him. "He said he couldn't explain why you recovered so fast. Said it didn't make medical sense. Said he'd have to buy me a drink before he shared his personal theory." Ethan smiled, small, exhausted, real. "I think I already know his theory. Same one I've got." Titan's tail moved against the carpet. One thump. "You're too stubborn to die. That's the theory. Too stubborn and too loyal and too much of a pain in the ass to let a bullet the size of a fingernail tell you when your time is up." Titan huffed softly through his nose. If dogs could laugh, that was it. Ethan's phone rang. Stone. "NCIS finished the full debrief on Haynes," Stone said. "He's been formally charged. Espionage, conspiracy, attempted murder of a service member, destruction of military assets." "He tried to kill a dog, sir, not an asset." "I know what he tried to kill, Cole. And I made sure the charging documents reflect that Titan is named as a victim, not a line item." Stone paused. The broker network is dismantled. 3 additional arrests across 2 commands. Haynes's intelligence leak compromised 4 operations beyond yours. Your dog didn't just save your life. The fragment they pulled out of him became the key piece of evidence that unraveled the entire network. Ethan closed his eyes. The bullet that was supposed to kill him had instead become the thing that exposed the man who fired it. The wound Titan carried in silence had become the proof that brought a traitor to justice. "There's one more thing," Stone said. Medical board reviewed Titan's surgical report and injury assessment. Given the severity of his wounds and the cardiac event during surgery, they've recommended medical retirement from active service, effective immediately. Ethan's hands stilled on Titan's fur. He'd known this was coming. He'd known it from the moment Khan showed him the X-ray and the jagged shadow between the ribs. Titan's body had given everything it had. Asking for more would be asking for something no one had the right to ask. "The Navy is processing a formal handler adoption," Stone continued. "Full transfer of ownership. He's yours, Ethan. Permanently. Not on loan, not assigned. Yours." Ethan looked down at Titan. The dog was watching him, the way he always watched, with those dark, steady eyes that had read Ethan's moods and movements for 6 years, with a fluency no human had ever matched. His paw slid forward and pressed against Ethan's knee. The same hold, the same grip, the same unspoken language they'd been speaking since the night a wild, scarred 2-year-old rested his head on a young seal's knee and chose him. "He was always mine, sir," Ethan said. "The paperwork's just catching up." Stone made a sound that might have been a laugh, might have been something else. "Sign the papers when they come through. And Cole, take care of him. He's earned a soft landing." "Yes, sir, he has." The papers arrived 2 days later. Ethan signed them at the kitchen table while Titan lay at his feet, gnawing on a chew toy Davis had brought over with a card that read, "For the toughest operator I know. 4 legs, no quit." Ward came by that evening with a bag of Titan's favorite treats, the expensive ones they used for reward training that Ward always complained were priced like they're made of gold. He sat on the floor and let Titan rest his head on his lap while Ethan made coffee. "He looks good," Ward said, scratching behind Titan's ears. "Better than good. He looks like himself." "He is himself," Ethan said. "Slower, sore, but himself." Ward was quiet for a moment. "You know, I keep thinking about those 2 inches. "What 2 inches?" "Khan said the bullet would have hit you in the chest if Titan hadn't shifted 2 inches to the left. 2 inches. That's the distance between you being here making coffee and you being in a box with a flag on it." Ward swallowed. He didn't know the shot was coming. He didn't calculate it. He just moved. Because that's where he always moves. Between you and whatever's trying to hurt you. Every time. Without thinking. "That's not training," Ethan said. "No," Ward agreed. "That's love. The kind most humans never figure out how to give." Titan's tail thumped against the floor. Twice this time. He was getting generous. That night, Ethan sat on the front porch with Titan beside him. The sky was fading from blue to orange to the deep settling purple that comes just before the stars remember they're supposed to show up. Titan lay with his head on Ethan's knee, the position that started everything 6 years ago on a stormy night in a training kennel when trust was earned 1 inch at a time. Ethan rested his hand on Titan's head. The fur was warm. The heartbeat beneath it was strong. Not the fragile flutter of the recovery room, but the solid, steady pulse of a dog who had stared down death and decided it wasn't impressive enough to obey. "You saved my life," Ethan said softly. Not just from the bullet, not just from the ambush, from the quiet stuff too. The nights I couldn't sleep, the mornings I didn't want to get up, the months after the divorce when I thought the best parts were already behind me. He scratched the spot between Titan's ears that always made his back leg twitch. You made me show up, every day, because you needed me to, and I needed you to need me. Titan shifted, pressing his weight harder against Ethan's leg. His eyes were half closed. Content. Safe. Home in every sense of the word. They gave you a commendation, Ethan said. Put it in your service record. Official Navy document, signed by a commander, filed with honors. He looked down at the dog who had carried a bullet in silence, died on an operating table, and come back because something in his chest was stronger than the thing that stopped it. But you don't care about that, do you? You never cared about any of it. The missions, the medals, the training records. You cared about one thing. Titan opened his eyes, looked up at Ethan, held his gaze with the same fierce, quiet certainty that had been there since day one. You cared about me, Ethan whispered, and that was enough to make you carry a bullet without making a sound. Titan's tail thumped once against the porch. Once was enough. It had always been enough. And in the failing light of a Virginia evening, a Navy SEAL and a German Shepherd sat together on a porch that belonged to both of them. Two warriors who had been through fire and silence and surgery and betrayal and the kind of love that doesn't make sense on paper, but makes perfect sense in the space between a hand and a paw that refuses to let go. Sometimes the ones who protect us carry wounds we never see. They don't ask for recognition. They don't slow down. They don't complain. They bleed quietly, work faithfully, and love so fiercely that their bodies break before their loyalty does. Titan showed us what devotion looks like when it costs everything. He took a bullet meant for his handler, hid the pain so the mission could continue, and when his body finally collapsed, he used his last strength not to cry out, but to hug the man he'd spent his whole life protecting. And Ethan showed us what it means to fight for the ones who fight for us. To listen when the silence is louder than the words. To refuse to let go of a paw, even when every machine in the room says it's over. If there is someone in your life, human or animal, who has stood beside you through the darkest moments without ever asking for anything in return, don't wait for a crisis to tell them what they mean to you. Hold them now. Thank them now. Because some heroes never speak a word, some miracles arrive on 4 legs, and some love is so deep that even death steps aside and lets it have the final word. God bless the ones who serve in silence. God bless the ones who refuse to let them go. And God bless every bond, spoken or unspoken, human or animal, that proves the strongest force in this world has never been a weapon. It has always been the heart that chooses to stand between danger and the one it loves. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment. Tell us where you're watching from. And subscribe if you believe, as we do, that loyalty, love, and courage will always be stronger than the darkness that tries to break them. May God bless you and the ones who walk beside you, on 2 legs or 4.